You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 237 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Today, we're heading to Staffordshire to meet Anna Barton. Brought up in London and trained in interior design, Anna never imagined that she'd become a farmer. But then she met her builder husband, whose parents needed help running their soft fruit farm in Staffordshire. And in 2016, the pair moved there. Anna became an overnight expert in growing strawberries and running a busy cafe and shop. Canalside Farm stands on the banks of the Trent and Mersey canal, hence the name, and is 26 acres in size. That's around 10 hectares. And the farm has a large glasshouse and 20 polytunnels planted with strawberries and raspberries. The farm also grows rhubarb, tomatoes, cucumbers and seasonal flowers, and everything is sold through an on-site farm shop and pick your own scheme. The family also grow around 20,000 pumpkins each year, sold for the increasingly large Halloween market in October each year. Anna, welcome to Meet the Farmers. I hope that
Thank
everything
you.
in that introduction was right. How are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, great. I feel that that's a great introduction. You've summed us up in a nutshell, really. But yeah, that's it. So pick your own farm and commercial fruit growers initially, but now farm shop cafe with the farm out the back, just to sort of make it a more retail experience, really.
Tell us about your part of the world, first of all. Why do you like living up in Staffordshire? Give us some good bits.
I mean, it's a truly beautiful county. We're on the edge of an area of outstanding natural beauty, and the Cannock Chase, which is just beautiful for walking and yeah, getting out in the countryside really. And we're on the canal, so we've got beautiful towpaths and walks around there. I mean, it's just yeah, stunning. On a beautiful sunny day, I don't think there's a more beautiful place to be. It's full of super creative, super talented people, lots of small businesses, lots of farmers doing all sorts of different things. So it's a county that I think is underrated, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
But there's loads going on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like a super community.
Yeah, it's great. And that's what we rely on really, is the community around us to support us and get on board with what we're doing here. And I think it's people are open to supporting that smaller business and local, and yeah, they want to sort of champion the underdog a little bit, as well. So it's great for us.
Talking of community, because I mean, we'll go on to talk about all the people on your farm because
Yeah.
you employ quite a lot of people apart from anything else, which we often see in soft fruit. But before we do that, I've given a little introduction to the farm, but can you give us some more info in terms of its history, how the family came there, and what you've got going on?
So my mother-in-law is a New Zealander, and my father-in-law grew up in Sheffield and went to university in Bath and did an aquaculture degree there. And he, after uni, went out to New Zealand to sort of learn about how they grow fruit and new methods and things out in New Zealand. And they actually met out there. So they lived out there together for a while and then came over here. Bought the farm 40 years ago last year. So, and they looked at a few places around the country. They had offered something down south and it fell through, and then they ended up here. There was a somewhat of a farm here when they first came, but they really got into commercial growing to start with. So lettuce was their big first crop. Then they dipped their toe into sort of potatoes, raspberries, strawberries, and it sort of all went from there really. But I think what they found is that it's 26 acres is a decent sized farm, but it's difficult to make it work commercially because you're competing against people that have hundreds and hundreds of acres of farm and can do things more competitively and on a bigger scale than you can. So for a period of time, they were selling into supermarkets and local businesses. But I think my father-in-law got frustrated with the fact that it's very up and down. It was felt very much out of your control. You know, a supermarket could have a contract with you for a certain amount, but they could change it last minute. The prices could change all the time. So he got a bit frustrated with that commercial growing side, which is when they thought a farm shop would be a good idea, which was a little shed at the front to start with that sold,
Oh, wow.
their own produce, and that was it, to just sort of the local community, really, while still doing commercial growing. And then it just went bananas from there, really. So what was a shed then went into a big packing shed that we've got here, and 2/3 of it was then retail shop, and then a third of it was still packing but on a smaller scale. And then in 2019 we took over the whole of that pack house, and it's now a full farm shop. And then I think it was 10 years ago, the café was put on the front as well, which is sat on the side of the canal. And it's just sort of gone from there, really. And then obviously the growing side has reduced down to the biggest crop is strawberries, next big is pumpkins, then we have raspberries, rhubarb, and the sort of ancillary tomatoes and cucumbers, more just to service the shop and cafe. And nothing goes out wholesale anymore. It all goes out through one of those revenue streams now.
I was going to say, it sounds like I'm still thinking about the cafe by the canal. That sounds amazing.
It is amazing, and for my in-laws, I think that's the point where they thought we need a bit of help here, because it suddenly became retail is one aspect. Well, farming is obviously one aspect, and that's where my father-in-law and then my mother-in-law sort of did the shop. But then it started to be, they put this hospitality thing in, and that is a whole other industry altogether. And so the challenges that you have in the shop and the farm are very different to the challenges you then have in the cafe. And so I think that's when they started to say, you know, to me, would I be interested in coming and helping, and sort of taking a bit of pressure off having to be an expert in all three areas. And we just kind of went from there, really.
Now, your life growing up was a far cry from your life now.
Yes.
And you actually had a career in interior design. So let's go all the way back to the beginning. Tell me about your early life and your early career as well before the farm.
So I've always grown up in southeast London, with my mum and dad, my brother and sister. So we, used to quite a city life, I guess. Didn't really have a lot to do with farms and the countryside down there, particularly. Went to uni in Reading, got my Bachelor of Science psychology degree. So nothing like this. And then went into sort of sales design for like more big developers, basically. So to start with, it was designing the kitchens for like an apartment block in Wembley, or you know, that sort of thing, and doing a lot of traveling, driving around up and down the country, and very much living that city life. And didn't really think this would ever be on my radar in the future, until even when I met my husband, he's one of the developers that we were working for, which is
Okay.
not the best way to have met your partner. But it all happened
I don't know.
outside of, there was no, wrongdoing on any parts there. So we met because we were doing the install for one of his projects, and then we both worked doing those things for about 5-6 years together. And then it's only when we got married the following year, his parents obviously thought they could trust me now because we were married, asked if there was any interest there to come and sort of help with the farm shop, farm cafe. And they were also trying to sort of get that event and that public facing kind of marketing side sorted a bit more. So I think they kind of could see the synergy between the two with me doing that sort of stuff. So just went from there, and haven't looked back 8 years or whatever it is later, really.
Yeah. Tell me about that first year on the farm, getting to know how everything worked. What was that like?
I think there were a lot of tears and
Yeah.
stress, because for me as well, it's about managing that relationship with family as well. And I think a lot of farmers will probably relate to that, as being like that, almost that second generation coming in. There's that balance between wanting to make an impact, coming up with new things, but also not rocking the boat and having that respect for that 40 years of experience that you don't have. So I'd say that first couple of years were challenging, and I do think that I thought, have I done the right thing? Because I think the biggest thing change for me was that 24/7 kind of having it on your mind all the time, and all that. And like, even as a farm shop, we're open 7 days a week. And a crop doesn't stop growing. So whereas, you know, if you work for a business and you do Monday to Friday, you sort of stop, don't you? But it doesn't stop. You're never off here, I think, is the biggest thing. And I did find that a big challenge to start with. And I think that's one of the things, the biggest change for me was probably that. I think all the practical things you can learn, and you can, yeah, it's just like learning anything, isn't it, really? You just, you have to take, you know, lessons from people and grow and change and those sorts of things. But I think it's that whole it being on all the time and there never really being a proper break from it. I think that was the biggest change and challenge for me to start with, probably.
Do you manage to find time to get away from the farm now?
Well, I'm lucky in the sense, so it's my brother-in-law and I that kind of do the day-to-day running of things, and he has now taken on the house on the farm, and I actually don't live on the farm. And I think for me that's a big thing, that you can step away and you can have that separation between work and home, and I think that's really important. And I think I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I think, yeah, you do have to learn to just switch off from it and accept that some things are a bit out of your control when you're not there, but you've got to have that balance for your own sanity, I think, of being able to say, well, I'm not going to actually, or just making sure you're handing it over to someone else and knowing that someone else you trust is doing that for you for a period of time. I think that's been the biggest change.
Now, there must also been a huge amount to learn, just in terms of the soft fruit side of things, I suppose, and learning about the farming aspect. How did you find that?
Was challenging, but I think it's just fascinating and interesting. And I think sometimes it's just stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something completely different is exciting in itself, really. So I'd say, of course, there was challenges and stuff. And I think I'm quite a control freak, kind of, not control freak, that's too harsh, but like, I like to know that my actions will lead to the definite outcome being this. And that doesn't really happen there, because you've got weather to contend with, you've got all these external sort of factors that are completely out of your control to deal with. And I think, yeah, that's probably another of the challenges, isn't it, really? That I think sometimes, again, in a work environment, it's very structured and organised, but actually it's not really like that. Every day is different, and yeah, every season is different, every month of the year is different, and you've got to sort of be adaptable and adapt to change quickly and sort of respond to stuff, rather than, I know today I'm coming in and I'm going to do this. You have to just come, see what's happening, and then be responsive to it. I think that was probably, again, another sort of change in just your mentality to things as well.
Was there anything that you were surprised by coming into farming, or was it pretty much as you expected?
I think the workload surprised me. Is that fair to say? I think you assume that things tick over a bit more than they probably do, but there's constant checking and making sure there's no disease, there's no pests, nothing's blown over in the night. You know, you've got to keep your eye on the weather. Like, I've never used the weather app so much as to sort of, oh, is it going to be, is it going to be rainy? Is it going to be sunny? Is it going to be this? And I think that kind of, yeah, I think I didn't appreciate that overwhelming workload, I guess, probably. Because I think that, like, the actual stuff to do, you can teach. And because of the size of us, it's overwhelming to a point, but it's not overwhelming where you've got hundreds and hundreds of acres. And I think we've reduced the farm down to a size where it's manageable, and there's peaks and troughs obviously with growing and how busy you are, but actually I think it's just that, that mental, it's happening all the time, and the crop doesn't stop growing just because you go and do something else. You've sort of always got to have one eye on everything. I think that's probably the biggest thing I would say.
This episode is being supported by our primary sponsor, Howden Rural, which is the new name for A-Plan Rural. The Howden team shares my passion for giving a voice to farmers, and we are both driven to raise the profile of farming voices to a wider audience. Howden Rural do a lot of work on social media themselves, sharing farming accounts and farming stories. They have a rural community blog which shares farmers' experiences, and they also support a growing number of initiatives that champion UK farmers, including this podcast. So a big thank you to Howden Rural for supporting Meet the Farmers. Let's talk about soft fruits a bit generally. What are the challenges of growing, and sort of, I suppose, broad challenges here?
The weather, the pests, the disease, I think for us as well, from our retail head, it's keeping your demand in line with sort of what you have growing, which is hard. So we find we get this big flurry of strawberries where we don't have enough capacity to sell them in June. We can't pick them fast enough, and then that's when you get problems with disease and things because you're not picking them quickly enough. But then we have that thing where people expect strawberries in April, and we don't have strawberries in April because they don't grow in April. So I think that's the challenge on that side of things. Yeah, and I'd say soft fruit is the hardest crop. I can't say that because I haven't grown every crop, but it's a really challenging crop to grow because it is so, it can turn really quickly. So if you're not on top of checking for first signs of disease and things like that, your whole crop can be ruined because it spreads so quickly. So I think soft fruit, I would say, and I think my father-in-law would tell you the same, is one of the hardest crops to grow. So when we grow pumpkins, for example, you put them in the field, you put your matting down, and you just leave them and they just do their own thing. Whereas soft fruit is very temperamental. The weather can affect it. Like I say, disease and things and pests can affect it like quickly. Whereas I feel like if something is going wrong with the pumpkins, you've got time to change them. They're a lot more hardy. So I'd say if you asked me today whether I would choose strawberries as a crop to grow, I probably would say no, because it's the most stressful of them all. But it's also a fruit that people love and they come down in their masses for. So it's a crowd pleaser. So it's that balance, isn't it? Really.
It's really interesting that you say that people expect strawberries to be out in April,
We
and
get people
probably at other
asking in
times of year.
January, is Pick Your Own open today in January? And I think, I don't know what planet you live on to think that it would be open in January. They just expect it to be open all the time. If they see that you're a Pick Your Own farm, they don't understand it's seasonal. And then when they want a definite date that it's going to start and be open, people get really miffed if you can't tell them, oh, it's going to be that 1st of May, because like if the weather's rubbish, it can be a week, 2 weeks later. But people expect you to be able, like someone would want me to tell them now, Pick Your Own is going to open on the 1st of May. And I just can't tell them that, because if we have rubbish weather, it'll probably be the middle of May. So, it's just, I think that's the challenge, dealing with direct retail and the public rather than selling commercially.
Where do you think that perception of sort of lack of seasonality comes from? Is it driven by the supermarkets? Is it a wider cultural thing? What is it?
I think it's a lack of education about it a lot. And I think because, like in a supermarket, you can get strawberries all year round. And I don't think people appreciate that, obviously, a lot of them are grown in controlled environments and obviously in hotter countries and things. But people think that we grow our bananas and stuff. Like so they'll come into the farm shop and think bananas and the mango or whatever are grown here, because they associate us as a fruit farm and they know we grow certain fruit and vegetable here, but they will just assume that those tropical fruits are grown here as well. And I think that's just a lack of actually associating the farm and people physically growing your fruit, I think people think they just appear in the shop and they don't understand the process that it's gone through to get to the shop. I would say, and I don't know what that is. I think it is just a lack of education, probably in schools, and also a lack of education. Well, it's just because everything is so readily available. I don't think people appreciate that it might be available in the shop, but it's not grown in the UK.
Yeah, I think it's something that we come back to again and again and again, isn't it? It's this idea that do people really know what's involved? And really, whose responsibility is it to get that message out there? There's clearly a lot more to be done. And I think this has to happen from an early age as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's clearly people are approaching you in January for strawberries on farm, then there's clearly we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think we are trying to, there's a great trust of schools that come and do workshops with us now that we really encourage about eating the colours of the rainbow, we call it. So why it's important to eat fruit and veg, but also different coloured fruit and veg. And we take them out on the farm and try and show them, each stages of growing. So they tend to come in springtime and they can see strawberries and then raspberries, but they can also see like the end of the rhubarb, but then they can see the start of the pumpkin. So it's trying to sort of get them in that mind frame of, well, not everything's available all the time, and this is what it looks like at this stage, and this is how long it takes to grow. And I think they're really useful workshops for them and stuff. But that's that school independently taking that initiative to seek us out and ask about it, whereas it's not something that's on the national curriculum to go to a farm and stuff. So I think it's those special kinds of teachers that are looking for that next thing for the children in their class. And unfortunately that doesn't happen everywhere, but I think here we've got sort of inner city schools in Stoke that come to us. We've also got people who are in the local village that come to us to do those sort of workshops. And I think just the more we can be doing things like that, the better, really. And I think a big focus for us this year is to try and roll that out a bit more to people, because I think it's so important. And some of the kids that, you hold up different vegetables and you're like, what's this and what's that? And some of them just don't have a clue unless it's an orange, an apple or a banana, so it's just that education, I think. And like you say, from an early age. So it's just natural that you think about it, really, and appreciate what's gone into actually growing that fruit to get it there to be on your plate.
Now, some farmers might be listening to you in terms of you're selling 100% of your products direct to the public, and there's a lot of talk about selling more to the public. But some farmers might see that as more of a risk if you're not spreading your risk across maybe selling to some wholesalers as well, selling to other routes. What would you say to them?
I think it's definitely a gradual process, because we didn't just swap from one to the other overnight. We, for a long time, did mainly through the shop, but then we had, and pick your own, but then we still sold to like into Birmingham market and things when we had a flurry of whatever. But so it is, I think, a gradual process of building up that brand, I guess, and people getting to know that you're there. But I'd say if you can get to that point and you have the confidence to do it. And I also would say, like, we're obviously a much smaller farm. So if you've got a massive farm, it's obviously a lot harder. But I would say it's the best thing we've ever done. Obviously, your price that you're selling out at is better and it comes direct to you. You haven't really got that middleman as such that takes a bit of the money out of it for you. I'd say it's a great footfall driver if you've got other things going on your farm, because people want to come and see it being grown. And pick your own, I think, is growing ever more popular. And yeah, I think we get a lot from social media feedback that people want to know where their food is coming from more. I think that is a question that people ask. And I think we always say there's definitely a place for supermarkets and we'll never be the cheapest person to come to for your produce. But I think people like that they could come on the farm and see that this is where it's grown. These are the people that have grown it. These are the people that have picked it. And there is that trust about food now, because I think there's been too many headlines of pumped up meat and stuff that's been grown unethically or whatever. I think if people can see it and touch it and feel it, I think that adds value to the product. And I think you've just got to have that confidence to do it, I think. And I think, yeah, it's a gradual process, absolutely. But I think we wouldn't do it any differently now that we're here.
Now, as a fruit farm, you naturally employ quite a few people, especially seasonally. There's that word seasonal again. Are there any peak seasons when you need more labour? And there's a lot in the news generally about the labour issue for many farming sectors, and I suppose the economy generally, but especially in farming. How are you finding it?
So, as a business, we employ about 55 people, but actually on the farm, we have max about 7 people that work on the farm that pick. And that is because actually a lot of it the customer picks. So if you're doing pick your own, they're picking the strawberries for you. So that picking
Yeah,
and
of
packing
course.
element is probably only about 40%, I'd say, of the business is picked and packed and put in the shop or in the cafe. The rest is through pick your own. So instantly you sort of need 60%. Well, not really, because you're growing. Obviously, in the growing process, you need that labour. But that picking and packing side is massively reduced because you're doing pick your own and people are going and picking their own, I guess, really. But we do definitely have a flurry of, so we have 2 people that work on the farm all year round, and then you have an increase of 4 to 5 seasonal labour, as we call it, that will come. We'll sort of get half come probably March time, that will plant our pumpkins, that will plant our bedding and basket plants that we sell. They'll stay for about 4 months, and then we have an overlap where everyone's here in June because that's our peak picking time. But it's also times where we're sort of like cutting back, like trimming the strawberries and stuff, getting them ready for the next sort of rotation and finishing things off. And then that second lot of labour again will do 4 months, but they'll probably stay until the end of September because that's when we sort of need everyone to do all the bits for the pumpkins and then sort of close the kind of growing side down over the winter, basically. So yeah, we're not mass, like we get tons of people over and we get the same people over. So that's where we've sort of found a difference. So when everything happened with us leaving the EU, we did have a little panic about it, really, about how that works. And I know a lot of people have struggled because there's a mountain of paperwork that you have to now go through to get people to come over. But we have the same sort of couples that come each year. Yeah, I know that it is a huge challenge. And I think if we lost one of our couples and we had to go and look for others, I don't know whether we would get that seasonal worker from abroad anymore.
It sort of links to our next subject, which is part of the show where we talk about general challenges in farming, but also opportunities. Yeah, by the way, listeners, yeah, I have had people get in touch with me and say, why you always talk about challenges, but not the opportunities as well? So we're going to reframe this one: general challenges and opportunities in farming. What for you, Anna, are the biggest challenges and opportunities?
Okay, so I had to try and had to think about this, but it's really difficult because I sort of have my retail head on a lot of the time. So I guess it's like we touched on before, we're sort of being able to meet customers' expectations in regards to availability of the crop and the quality of the crop. I think that's quite tricky. And I would say the other thing I had down was making the farm earn money in its own right, because what I would say is the farm is obviously part of a wider business, but if we were just running the farm on its own, I would say it would be the least profitable part of our business. So I think that's probably our challenge, is to try and make it, yeah, in its own right, probably turn over a bit more money for the amount of labour that we need to sort of keep it going, I guess. We always want the farm to be there because it's such a big part of who we are and our identity, but it becomes harder and harder to sort of make it pay when you put it alongside a retail and hospitality business that are growing and turning over more money than it is. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think
that's
I think you've summed up there an issue for so many farmers out there. I I can already feel people sort of thinking, "Yep," just nodding away at that.
Yeah, and that's such a shame. I think it's a crime. I think it's such a travesty because, the thought of like we get people all the time like, oh, we should just put a play barn in or whatever, and I just think no, like that's just not what we're about. It's such a huge part of who we are. I would never want to see the business be here without the farm. But as costs increase, as labour increases, as all those things increase, as costs go down elsewhere, like the prices people are paying for stuff in the supermarket goes down, it makes it harder for you to justify your price. So all those things make it a real challenge. And I think, I think that's the biggest challenge for us, is to make the farm be more sustainable in its own right, really.
Okay. Where's the positive? I mean, I'm guessing you are quite positive for the future.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is just turning the farm into more of an experience, really, welcoming the public onto the farm more. I think that's been a big sort of mental adjustment for us as a wider family, to open it up and let people sort of roam around and have a look and stuff, because you want people to sort of respect it and treat it in the way that they should. But I think the more we're sort of having workshops available, like we've talked about, opening up for pick your own. We'd love to have like dining experiences out there where you eat from the crops and things like that. I think that's the way that we see it becoming more of a viable venture, as in trying to get the public out there and still educating people, but in a bit more of a subtle way, I guess.
Okay. So more in terms of experiences, more sort of on the tourism side. Is that
Mm.
really where sort of the future lies? Do you think if I asked sort of where you wanted to be in 10 years' time, if we're having the same conversation then, what would it look like?
We've actually got a planning permission in at the moment to add a bit of a more of a production space to attach to our farm shop, which would mean using more produce from the farm, making more homegrown things ourselves, like jams and those sorts of things. So I think it's that value added things from the farm. So I think, it feels a shame that the farm in its own right isn't enough. Like, it's really hard to say that, but then I sort of think if you can take the strawberries and make them into jam, or a gin or something like that, using a production kitchen and then selling it through the shop, I think that's where the public is telling us that, the way to sort of earn money out of it is, rightly or wrongly. But I still think obviously all the pick your own experiences will still be there, and we just want them to be bigger and better and get more people out there, I guess, is the thing. And I think for us, it's always about being authentic. It's always about doing things gradually. It's about doing things in the right way. I never want to be like this huge operator that doesn't have a soul. You want it all to mean something and be coming back to the farm, which is our roots. And I think that it'll always be a massive part of who we are. And I think as we think about every change, we want the farm to be a big part of it, and it will always be that way, I think, really. But I don't, we'll have to see what the future holds and what people want to see from us, I guess, is probably where we sort of will be dictated by it.
Yeah, wait and see. There is
Yeah.
still, I'm sure, there's going to be a huge amount of change over those next 10 years. Who knows where we will be?
I know, and I really hope it doesn't go. Yeah. Anyway, we could get all political about it, couldn't we? But I hope it does sort of. I hope that British farming is supported more, and people can see the value in it and support it. And I do think there is that appetite for it still. I don't think that's gone away.
Meet the Farmers is brought to you by Rural Pod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations, and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. Rural Pod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast. You're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. Yeah, well, what's your take on the whole the farmer protests at the moment? Obviously, we've seen them in Europe. There is increasing activity, I'll say that, in different parts of the UK. What's your thinking on it?
I don't know. I just don't know if that's the best way to get your point of view across, really. I think I can understand people are frustrated, and that's the way that people want to show their frustration. And I think obviously it's creating noise because people are talking about it. But I don't know what the answer is about getting big changes across the line. I think, and I don't think it will change overnight is the thing. I think it's always a gradual thing. And I think it's lots of conversations with people and just being persistent and sticking to what you want to get out of it. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of all the sort of reasons behind everything, but I think, yeah, I don't know if a protest is going to get you exactly what you want, but I do think if you're not getting what you want and you're getting frustrated, I don't. If that's the last port of call for you, they obviously feel like it is, don't they?
Let's move on to the quick questions. The first of one of these is, if you could only eat one fruit for the rest of your life, which fruit would it be and why? I'm wondering whether I'm going to be surprised.
Well, I have to say strawberry, don't I?
When you do, really.
But I would say strawberry, I think, because yeah, they're just, I think because you like, obviously you eat them fresh from freshly picked, and there's no better taste. And it's the first sign of summer, isn't it? I think that taste will always be associated with that. Oh, it's the start of summer because our strawberries are ready. And yeah, I couldn't say anything else. I'd feel disloyal if I said any other fruit, to be honest.
Yeah, it really is just the fruit of summer, isn't it? Just
Yeah,
everything about it. Just seasonal strawberries. They're just
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
The second one, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would you choose and why?
So I've got a cultured answer and an uncultured answer because
Okay,
I
give
thought.
me both.
So I did Charles Darwin as my cultured one because basically we went to the Galapagos when I was just finishing uni, and it was just so interesting. I'm not really like a historical person, not very sciencey. It's just my brain is a bit more creative, but I just like couldn't get enough of the information. And there was this one lonely turtle that was left called Solitario George because he's like the last of this species, and I just all that stuff.
Oh,
And I thought like he would have a lot of stories to tell. That would be my cultured answer anyway. So yeah, I thought he'd be an interesting person to sit with.
okay. And the other answer?
Princess Diana, because she would just have so much gossip, wouldn't she?
Ah,
Because I'm
I think
watching The
that's a great
Crown at the
one.
moment, so I thought, I'd speak to her and see what the truth is behind all the things that people. There's so many different stories, aren't there, about everything? So I'd want the goss from her.
Okay, I like both of those. And the final one, a book to recommend.
I got asked by a dissertation student to give my thoughts on this book called Braiding Sweetgrass. So it's about this Indigenous ecologist who basically says that there's a reciprocal relationship between like plants and people, and it's almost like karma. You like how you treat your
Okay.
plants and how you interact with these growing things like humans. There's like this reciprocal relationship, so it's about respecting plants and growing crops and things, and actually if you respect them and their value and their worth and everything, then they sort of this sounds really hippy dippy, but I just thought it was interesting because if you grow commercially, you grow for a reason, but then it was all about how if you treat them well, they treat you well in return, sort of thing. I just thought it was a really interesting like alternative view to everything, because it's just the opposite of how Western people, I guess, view plants and fruit and those sorts of things. But yeah, that would be my one to have a read.
I like that idea. What was it called again?
Braiding Sweetgrass. I can't pronounce the surname. Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Okay. And not expecting that one. The final questions, Anna, what is your message for the public?
I'd just say support your local farmer and don't believe the headlines all of the time.
And message for farmers?
just keep up the good work, I guess. I've heard a few of your podcasts, and that seems to be the general gist, doesn't it? But I would agree. I think, yeah, it's not easy. There's challenges, but I think it's such a valuable part of our UK culture, and we just need to keep plodding on and doing our best and keep up the good work, I guess.
Yeah, keep up the good work, guys.
Yeah.
And finally, your recommendation for a blog, podcast, or social media account to follow, which can be farming or non-farming.
So mine's not farming, but it is about women in work, because I think this is another thing about this sort of industry. So she's called Mother Pucker, and
Like the
she
name.
thing called Flex Appeal, which is all about it. Basically, she's campaigning for that balance for women with children and working, and how that juggle is, yeah, tough. And she just campaigns for it nonstop about that flexible working, and how just because you've got a child to look after at home doesn't mean you're less valuable in the workplace. And it's trying to sort of change the mindset of employers, and how they sort of treat those people that have got that juggle. And I just think she's a really strong, powerful voice. And yeah, I love reading everything she does and listening to everything she does.
Cool. That's a great shout out. And yeah, I always like a non-farming shout out. So
Oh,
that's
that's
great.
good.
Thank
Okay.
you. We'll leave it there. Anna, thank you so
Okay.
much for coming on Meet the
Thank
Farmers.
you. Thank you very much.
That is it for today. A big thank you to my guest, Anna Barton, for coming on the show. Thank you very much for listening. And thanks to our primary podcast sponsor, Howden Rural Insurance. If you could do one thing after listening to this, please do share the episode, share it on your socials. Tell someone you know about the podcast. It's the only way that it grows. Next time, we're sticking with soft fruit actually, and I'm speaking to another soft fruit grower, but this time in Worcestershire. Val Padder will be on the show. Don't forget to check out our sister show, Rural Business Focus. You can find that on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this. I'll be back with you next week on Meet the Farmers. But for now, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers, and thank you very much for listening. Just a little more about our primary sponsor, Howden Rural, which is the new name for A-Plan Rural. Same people, different name. Howden Rural provide bespoke insurance cover for farms and estates. This could be for anything from tractors and machinery to a new exciting diversification venture. So for more information, visit howdeninsurance.co.uk/rural.